Welcome to the Internet of Things equation, a podcast when I talk about the Internet of Things domain both from the technical and business perspectives. I'm Łukasz Malinowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer. My today's guest has 35 years of experience in building high-performance teams. In 2007, he founded ClearBlade, a successful IoT and edge solution provider supporting companies during the digital transformation. IoT technology often assists digital transformation, and that's the topic that we're going to cover today. Hello, Eric. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Hey, Lucas, thanks for having me.
Could you briefly summarize your track record for the listeners?
Oh, gosh, sure. I started back in 1988 at IBM on an air traffic control project in Maryland. So my early career was mainframe, complex systems. Spent a few years doing that, been hospital systems, and then was a specialist in what was called client server technology in the early 90s. So we were moving workload off of mainframe systems onto PCs. Object-oriented programming was all the rage back then. Left IBM in '94 and did a startup in the San Francisco Bay Area that became a pretty successful services company today. It's a company called Proficient. A bit of history on big enterprise systems, and I learned some interesting things in the early days about complex systems and about specifically how processing swings between centralized and distributed. Someone very smart on that air traffic control project told me as a kid, hey, Eric, when you go throughout your career, you're going to see this pendulum swing between centralized and distributed. And it's definitely a pattern that I've recognized over my career over the last several years.
Before we jump into the main topic, I would like to really cover a few things that you just mentioned. Actually, I would like to ask you, because you mentioned complex systems. Based on your experience, do you see the overall complexity of IT solutions like growing or decreasing over time?
Oh gosh, it's growing. We've added so many different layers of complexity. DevOps would be the thing that I would point to. Some for the better, some not so much for the better. It depends. The systems of my era, early era, were often closed proprietary systems. There's obviously a much more open ecosystem now. So I think that part's easier. But there's a big difference between building applications for certain systems and then building core software that needs to scale to millions of devices. I think it's a very different skill set to piece together other people's products to create a solution and then to create something from the ground up.
That's great insight. And in my opinion, the complexity is also bigger than used to be. And we added all of those abstraction layers that try to create interfaces between those underlying systems. And we basically build abstraction over abstraction over abstraction, which kind of gets out of hand. I totally agree with you. That cycle that we've got the centralized computing, distributed computing. I think that's a great point because, in my opinion, cloud is kind of centralized computing from the
For sure.
developer's perspective. And we see a huge movement to the edge, to the distributed computing. And this is something that we will cover today. So I think that's a great intro to our conversation. But you are on the mission to provide multiple industries with the power of IoT, enabling them to deliver immediate return on investment. And that is significant undertaking. I would like to decompose that a bit. What
Sure.
kind of ROI can companies achieve by utilizing IoT technology?
Well, a tremendous ROI as long as they identify what they want out of IoT, right? You just don't want to go into it for the sake of doing it. Connecting up remote equipment, making sure you're getting the data from that equipment to fuel your analytics initiatives and your AI initiatives is extremely important, extremely valuable. And some of the hardest data to acquire is machine data in the field. There's a tremendous upside into just first connecting your devices and getting some insights into how those devices and those assets are operating in the field. And then you can start moving up the maturity path on really creating autonomous systems over time.
Are there any specific outcomes when you talk with stakeholders, mainly the business stakeholders, that they expect from digital transformation powered by IoT?
Well, the ones that I'm seeing are really first are just remote monitoring of equipment in the field. That's kind of step one. Say you're a large rail company. We do a lot of work in rail, so I always like to use that example. I've got lots of assets along my railway. I've got crossings, I've got switches, I've got locomotives, I've got blowers, heaters, all sorts of things. And typically those things are monitored and maintained manually. You'd have someone in a truck that would drive and inspect these devices. And then really, look, during the pandemic, you didn't have the personnel to go do this. They were furloughed or they weren't coming into work. So you needed remote monitoring of this equipment. Also during disasters or weather events like a hurricane, right? You want to be able to see what's operational in the field. You multiply this times many industries, right? Try the building space, other transportation like electric vehicles, the ability to get the data and in real time know exactly what the status of any of your assets are in the field is extremely critical.
I agree with you that the visibility is one of the core value propositions of IoT. Once you've got that visibility, you can build on top of that. As you said,
Right.
basically to got remote access to those devices. But you started ClearBlade in 2007. That is pretty long time ago, at least from the IoT perspective. What type of market opportunity you saw back then and how you approached that?
So 2007, ironically, I was asked by IBM to go do it again, basically rebuild the business that I built in the 90s that was really supporting something called enterprise modernization. So we would go into legacy big box mainframe systems and convert them from some older technology into something more current like Java is a good example. As we went through those first 4 years, one, it was very hard. We were very good at it. They were very obviously a services labor intensive business. And my CTO, Aaron Alsbrook, and I saw a couple really massive movements. Again, I mentioned this earlier. When you have a career as long as I've had, you start to identify things, and I call it pattern recognition. You see the same movie once again in a different way. So just like I saw in the early 90s where we started moving processing from the mainframe to the PC to take advantage of the graphical capabilities of PC, we saw the same thing happening with mobile and cloud and eventually edge. We had a massive opportunity. One, when we were pivoting within IBM, we said, look, we're going to work on mobility. We really didn't like what IBM had acquired in that space or what their strategy was. And we really, I'll tell you a specific story. There was a company in 2013 that got bought by Facebook. That company is called Parse, and they were bought April 25th, 2013. I know the exact date because it was April 26th when I woke up and saw the news story and decided to call Aaron and say, let's go build this. So what we liked about that product was it was API based, it was cloud based, it was very flexible, and it really solved the problem for mobile app development by putting the processing and the data in the cloud and not having it on the physical device where you had to back then deal with iOS versus Android native app development, right? So what we saw was, my gosh, Facebook just bought these folks. They bought them for a pretty high multiple. So the venture capital side of me said, I like that. But the other part was who's doing this for large enterprise, right? Not just for mobile apps and not just for a company like Facebook, but for industry, for critical infrastructure. And we didn't see that anyone was really building something like this. So we quickly came up with our thesis and said, we're going to go build what the market needs for this.
The idea is great, but execution is even more important, in my opinion. You've got proven track record. You mentioned that you already created a few companies before starting ClearBlade. So if you could give us some hints, lessons learned, and some failures. Let's say that I want to start an IoT company. I've got technical skills, but non-business skills. So what would you recommend?
So one, obviously believe in your team. Find people much smarter than yourself, and give them the power to create. It was always something that I felt limiting in my career when I worked for big companies, was I felt like I had more to give, but I wasn't really given the freedom to use my brain. And that was one of the first things that I learned was when in charge, don't make the same mistake that you felt like others made when you were not in charge. So first, giving people that agency, that authority to go build their idea, and we did that at ClearBlade. I had the general thesis along with Aaron to say, look, let's build software that is cloud independent, which was against the common knowledge at the time, still is, by the way. Back then, it was, especially with IoT, it was okay. Let's go build, pick a cloud, pick some of their parts, and let's build on what they're doing. So my first advice would be, one, trust your people. My second would be stick to your convictions. The market's always going to do something to put you off your game or concern you. For example, back in 2015, as we were building and actually had launched our first platform and edge product, Amazon jumped into the game buying a peer company of ours called Telemetry out of Denver. And that's how Amazon got started in IoT. And all of a sudden, my team comes racing in saying, oh no, Amazon's doing this. How are we going to compete? And that's another thing you learn is, one, have confidence and know that as long as you're addressing a market need, don't be so afraid of the bigger companies, because there's a value. There's value to being smaller and nimbler and doing things in a much different way than what the conventional wisdom says. I've seen this in IoT over the last decade for sure. Is almost everybody followed the same playbook. And look, back in 2015, 2016, there were probably 400 companies that looked just like ClearBlade, right? And I can tell you the number of times, lots of times, that we've been told you'll never make it. It's another thing. Don't listen to your critics. Believe in yourself, believe in your team, and continue on building with convictions. Don't be blind to what's going on in the market, but even if you're approaching it a different way, embrace that and take that risk, because that's what being an entrepreneur is. It's not about playing it safe. It's about take the big bet, build something better, bigger, and different than everybody else, and have the staying power to continue to prove it.
I think those are great points, especially the last one that you said about taking risks, because if you want to innovate, like, innovation is pure risk. Otherwise, that won't be called innovation. And sometimes market is not ready for that. Sometimes customers do not expect that. They just want to have better horse instead of a car. The story, as you said, repeats over and over again. So those are great points. Let's go back to the main topic, the digital transformation, because this is the topic that is extremely overused, often misunderstood on the social. You can find a number of experts on digital transformation that don't know what they are talking about. So speaking about that, is that a technological transformation, business transformation, or both, or mentality change maybe? How do you define digital transformation in plain English?
It's definitely both. It's one of those terms that drives me insane because it's so broad and it means something different to everybody. Just like digital twin does. I can go for an hour on what the heck is digital twin, right? Same DT. But digital transformation really depends on the business you're in and what you want to achieve at the back end, right? Where do I want to be? Some of it's technology driven, but a lot of it is business driven, right? I know companies that have completely changed their bottom line by transforming themselves through Internet of Things, saying we're going to charge for this service in a different way, or we're going to add this feature to our set of products, but we're then going to be able to do some very interesting things, for example, with energy on the back end, and we're going to be able to increase the margins in our bottom line. I'm going to be able to change the way that I maintain aircraft, and I'm going to be able to do a better job of being efficient in that and seeing all my equipment in a digital dance. So digital transformation has to be driven by the business first. Technologists like us, what we provide are the tools, and we should be one set of tools in your toolbox to help you with that digital transformation, which is why we architected our software to be very flexible, right? I always say this, you've got to play nice with others, means other technologies in your space and enterprise technologies that have been around for decades, because that's where the data needs to flow to. So having that sort of a view, again, going back in history to my past, knowing what it's like to work on very structured, very closed mainframe systems, making things as open and flexible as possible so the customer, the consumer, can bend and twist your product in a way that works for them. So one other thing I'll add, and this kind of goes back to digital transformation and lessons learned. You also can get too enamored with your own technology, and in the end, no matter how great your technology is, we have to be cognizant of delivering outcomes, end user solutions, and that's something we learned several years ago and added to our product set to say, hey, look, let's give the business operators the product that they need to remotely monitor and control these assets.
Again, you provided tons of details, and I would like to drill into a few of them. First is extremely important, and I would like to underline that for the listeners, that IoT is all about creating ecosystems. Like, you don't want to isolate your solution to defend from competition. You want to be as open as possible, as you said, and you want to be willing to integrate with some legacy systems, so to speak, because those are often the source of data, at least in the industrial IoT space. This is a great point, and for everyone designing IoT solution, be as flexible as possible. And IoT is just about ecosystem, and it's about that technical capability, as you said. I love that approach. You mentioned the business stakeholders that are the actual people in charge of digital transformation. Could you give us some hints how you designed your technical solution to be easy to use by people that are not necessarily focused on technology on daily basis?
Sure. So the first part of our journey was to build software that's identical between cloud and edge. I know of no other company that has done this. That's the technical part, right? We're enamored with our technology. So we created this fantastic, I call it a runtime. I like to avoid the term platform, but it's basically a platform that really can run on any Linux machine anywhere. So that means Linux in the cloud. That means gateways at the edge. Any edge that can run a Linux operating system can run ClearBlade. So we're closer to an operating system than we are a platform. We sit on top of Linux, but it really gives you that flexibility. Now, that being said, as we were rolling through 2018, 2019, and we had lots of big customers, what we noticed was it still took our customers too long to implement a solution. Even though had this great software and this great edge, and they could do both. And we were working with big railway companies, we're working with an aerospace company, we're working with building companies. And in 2019, we started realizing they're all building their own version of the same application to monitor or control a device and gather data from that device. And what I saw was most of the money was being made by system integrators. Nothing wrong with system integrators. They're a valuable part of the ecosystem, but they're spending 90% of the time building dashboards, right? And building connectivity, building at what I thought was too low of a level, usually using cloud vendors' components. And this was basically our competition. And even our customers were taking too long. So when the pandemic hit and we had to look at our business, we said, well, let's go focus on solving the solution problem, not just the technology problem. So my team got to work and built an application that runs on ClearBlade in the cloud and at the edge called Intelligent Assets. And what that application is a no code. And I can go on a whole debate on no code versus low code. I was a low code expert in the 90s. Low code is great for demos, very, very hard for production systems. No code, however, gives the power to the operator who doesn't know a single line of JavaScript or doesn't know how to write in any language, but they know their business. So they can go in and define what the attributes are of the asset. So basically the digital twin, but I don't need to know every aspect of that digital twin. I need to know temperature, location, speed, right, vibration, whatever attribute that the operator wants to read, they can read by defining it within the system and connecting with the device, all without getting their IT department involved or a system integrator. That's really what took off for us when we launched Intelligent Assets in 2020. And we used the blueprint from what we learned in rail, what we learned in aerospace, what we learned in the building space, and defined a very flexible system for defining assets and areas and connecting to those physical assets digitally in real time.
Let me highlight one fact that you just casually put out there that might be missed by audience, that is extremely smart in terms of your design, that your only dependency is the Linux operating system. Essentially means that your solution can run anywhere, and I believe this is extremely smart move. We've got all that debate with like single cloud, multi-cloud, on-prem, like the fight's on, and there are good arguments on every side. If you can design and build a solution that is only dependent on the Linux, which is essentially anywhere, like it doesn't really care if that's virtual machine or physical, whatever, then you really got tons of value for your customers, because they can just pick and choose whatever hardware they are going to put you on. Sole dependency on Linux only gives great flexibility and is very good from the customer's perspective as well, because the dependency is extremely limited. So let's say AWS decide to close the IoT offering, that doesn't hurt you at all, right? Because you can just move around. So I wanted to bring that up to the audience, because this is super important strategic decision, that the Linux is the only dependency.
And what we've seen, especially over the last couple of years, is the big players, I wouldn't say getting out of IoT, but shifting their model, saying, look, we want to ingest the data, we want to provide the AI, but let us defer to our partners that specialize in IoT to provide the engine. This has happened at Google. This is happening at Microsoft. I wouldn't be surprised if it happens at Amazon. And to be honest, the clouds are our partners, not our competition. They're just as happy if they're ingesting data through ClearBlade as if they were ingesting it from their own products. And what we all want is faster time to value for the customer. I personally believe the last decade of IoT has been a complete disaster. I think most projects have been a failure because they've taken too long, they're too expensive, and they really have struggled on scalability. And that's something that's not easily built. When you are a software company and you have designed for scalability out of the gate, that means you made very different design decisions early on. We've got a single binary that runs in a very small footprint, 30, 35 megabytes, both in the cloud and at the edge. And when you can scale that component horizontally very efficiently, and that's an embedded message broker, that is JavaScript execution, that is visualizations, that is the whole thing, the whole stack. So I get frustrated when I see people trying to piece together different parts of open source that may be successful for certain types of projects, but it's very hard if you're dealing with hundreds of thousands or millions of concurrent connected devices. It's a very hard problem to solve.
Scalability is a huge topic on its own, because if you want to do it right, you essentially need to create a solid framework, and you build on top of that framework the business functions and business modules, sort of speak. But if you build a POC that is just using some processing to deliver that specific business use case, that won't scale. There's no way to scale that piece of logic, and there is no way actually to extend that logic with some additional use cases. The underlying infrastructure, the way it is architected and developed, is crucial for IoT, because IoT should scale for any load. That's the whole premise. We should be able to connect any number of devices.
And if your business is solely IoT, I think that's a huge advantage, because you're constantly improving that software. You're constantly building it for security. 100% of our time is also looking at security risks and constantly updating the software. If you're doing this for your company, it's very difficult to remain that disciplined at that low of a level on a daily basis. So when you can trust that executable, that binary that is solid and constantly updated, and in use it over 300 customers around the world, over 39 countries, right? That there's lots of people using that software and constantly making suggestions to improve it or enhance it. So that's a big factor. It's having that reliability and repeatability, and knowing that, look, large class one rails are using it in the United States and aerospace and so forth. And then making sure it's flexible, then you now can play nice with others and be compatible with other solutions that are up and coming in the IoT space and in the enterprise space.
Let's go for a second to the digital transformation and let's look at it from the different angle. So what are the huge challenges and misconceptions about it that you see when you speak with C-level executives?
You touched on it. IoT at a basic level is not hard, right? If I'm connecting up one device or one type of device, and I want to use the parts that are available to me in any of the clouds, I can do a pretty good job of creating an IoT system. And maybe that one device becomes 100 or 1,000 or even 10,000. That's not that hard. But when you start getting into multiple different types of devices, multiple different protocols, multiple different use cases, which every IoT system I've ever seen, unless it's very basic, becomes more and more complex as you build. And I think this is kind of the conventional wisdom of the industry has really put us in a bad spot, meaning huge teams have been built inside of these companies to achieve digital transformation. And these teams are engineers. And what do we engineers like to do? We like to build. And we like to build at the lowest level. So their job is, wait a minute, why would I buy software that does this when my job is to build it and look at all these tools that I have at my disposal? This is where we have seen digital transformation fail time and time again because of internal beliefs and politics and lots of failure. I can't tell you how many times we've come in to replace the guts of an IoT project that's really started to fail and allowed them to keep the assets that they had built around that project, the mobile apps, the dashboards, the different databases that they wanted to flow to. That's the key to flexibility and digital transformation is, select your partners carefully and make sure that you can achieve ROI in less than 3 months. I think if you can't achieve an ROI in less than 3 months, then you probably picked the wrong provider or taken the wrong approach.
Based on my own experience, like 3 months is extremely short period if we are speaking about IoT deployment. There are always things that you cannot predict. There are always some both technical issues. There are some misalignment between technology, business, and even between business units. And you're saying that you are able to deliver ROI within 3 months. So what's the magic trick to do that?
So it's over 10 years of development, right? So there's a lot of work put into it, but also having lots of customers place requirements on your software to say, I need it flexible enough to do this, this, and this. Typically, we achieve it in a few weeks. And it doesn't mean that they've built out the entire system, but you can prove to them phase by phase, look, we will re-platform you off of whatever that you started with, and we'll do that in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, right, depending on how complex it is. Now let's set another milestone of show me that you can connect 20,000 concurrent devices sending this many messages. And then it's like, okay, show me you can pass a test on 1 million concurrent devices. These are the things that we typically don't see unsuccessful ones do. The successful ones force you to prove yourself every milestone along the way. One of our biggest customers forced that on us years ago. Ream is one of our biggest customers. They forced us to prove it to them before they committed to us. And they were very tough on our requirements because they had gone through a couple fits and starts on their own. And that kind of discipline should be used throughout the IoT industry, I think. And that's why I say the 3-month window is kind of my window, is if you can't achieve some sort of return on investment in the first 3 months, you may want to reevaluate your strategy.
I think that's very smart, and let me make that very clear to everyone listening that IoT transformation, digital transformation, whatever we're going to call it, that is an iterative process because everyone will learn along the way. The enterprise, the business stakeholders will realize how the company actually works. Going back to the visibility that you said, that they will actually see data flowing from devices back to the backend system so they can see what's going on. And business units, like based on my own experience, during digital transformation, business units of the same company start actually to speak with each other and to align about the processes that are cross units. That is huge mindset, and if you can provide a framework, as you said, that is flexible enough that you can say that's okay that you've got all of those little applications that you created yourself. I can integrate your applications within the base that I'm providing, and I put my name on it that this base is secure, scalable, and I will support it. And by the way, it only requires Linux to run on. That is huge. That is really huge value proposition and huge opportunity for enterprises.
Another thing that we've done here is we've taken on very, very tough projects and we've remained humble. A good example is Google. When they sunset their IoT core, we decided to build a product to match what Google's IoT core was and run it on our enterprise product. And that was a huge undertaking because we took on 250 new customers all around the world in a few months. If you can imagine the different types of businesses, the different regions of the world, the different profiles of the devices, and onboarding that many devices, it's a huge undertaking. So we had to learn a lot about improving our DevOps, right? In 3 different regions of the world: Asia, Europe, and North America. How to support that many customers with a small team, how to make sure that your software continued to improve from a scalability standpoint, security standpoint. Very, very tough stuff. We also gave all those customers a free migration tool to convert from Google into ClearBlade while keep staying on the Google Cloud. And that's why we won the majority of that business, is we gave an easier choice to those customers as opposed to going building from the ground up to replace what they were using before or moving somewhere else. One thing that we've maintained here at ClearBlade as well, we have a very dedicated team I've got most of my engineers have been here over a decade, which is unheard of, especially in Austin, Texas, and Chicago, where most of them are. But they've remained very curious and very focused on improving the software every day. So that sort of dedication is something that I would also say that companies need to look for. Companies that have done it for a long time, companies that have multiple success stories across industry, and then that fit your profile. Those are the things that we're proud of here. And I say we're kind of like a cockroach. We've survived the last 11 years of IoT when it's been just kind of this storm. And now it's filtering out. We're happy to be one of the players that are making a difference.
I used to work for big names in the industry, and dedication that you just mentioned, that there are people that are willing to stay for a long time with you. This is something extremely unique. Everyone is talking about it, but I never saw that in practice. So what's so special about the way that you work, your secret to actually make everyone engaged for a longer period of time and they want to on board with you?
So that's the thing I'm most proud of, is I think it's my superpower, and it's about team building, right? You treat every individual in your organization as an equal, and you give them the freedom to create. And what ends up happening is they're not there for you. They're there for their own challenge, their own education, and the other people around them. So when you maintain that excellence, that cohesiveness keeps people together. I'm constantly amazed at interns that we had that started with us in 2011, 2012 are now leading big parts of our business. And it's a mix of people from all different eras of programming, right? I've got folks that were CTOs of public companies in the 90s during the dot-com boom, working with people that just graduated from University of Illinois, masters in computer science, right? Completely different eras, but they all get along. So when you have an exceptional set of people that all respect and work well together, and then when they're working on really hard problems that they love to solve, then that thing takes a life of its own. And when you're seeing success in the market, and you're seeing your software being used across industry, you're seeing your edge compute used, that's the kind of reward along with the growth of the company. And I've said this for years now, it's very hard to do, but the best software is built by small teams under extreme pressure to compete, to survive, right? we're not doing this as just a part of a division of a big company that could end up deciding not to continue with it in a few years. This is part of our survival. This is part of our success. And they all know that they're part of a bigger, and they're just not a cog in a machine. They're really get to use their brains and to the utmost. And I'm super grateful to everyone on our team that has get here.
The thing that you mentioned, that is a single thing that demotivated me a few times in my own career, that I was putting my brain and my heart to design and develop something, and that thing got on the shelf. No one cared about it at the very end. That was devastating for me. Like, I thought, what's going on? There is no point for me to doing my best if there is a risk that no one would care. As you said, that dedication, and when you see the outcomes that actually someone is using your product in the wild, that makes you feel proud and makes you feel focused.
And I think that I'm glad that you shared that story, because that's exactly what happened to me. I'm a computer scientist. My first 2 years, I was working on an air traffic control project, late nights, just doing your very best. And I realized after 2 years, none of the stuff I worked on was ever going to see the light of day. It never made it to production. And that was extremely demotivating to me. And then, working in big corporate America, there were times where I was really good programmer. I was really good at sales. I was very bad at politics, horrible at it. So my mouth would get me in trouble. Typical entrepreneur, right? I didn't color between the lines. I did great things, but those great things got rewarded, but not rewarded as much as they should have. And that's what put it in my head years later. If I said it to myself as a 26, 27-year-old, I said, if you're ever in a position of power where you can lead a team, don't do it the way that you saw that you didn't like, right? Don't follow those same patterns. Try to do it differently. And I think that's part of the culture of our organization, is respect all the folks in the company, but really take an engineering mindset to say the engineers are the lifeblood of the organization. Let's build sales and marketing and around those folks and make sure that the work that they do sees the light of day.
Politics is something I suck on because I'm too honest and too straightforward for that, and that typically gets me into troubles. But in the rare events when the other side understands the true meaning of what I'm trying to get across, that is really rewarding, because then you can see that transformation going on. Right? And if some customer wants to pay lots of money for something they don't really need, then you should have the courage to say that this is not going to work for them. Because
Exactly.
in the long run, that will hurt your brand if you take that money and provide exactly what the customer wants, but not
Agreed.
what the customer needs. So what is your approach? Going back to the digital transformation, how can you distinguish what customers want from you with what they actually need?
You hit on it in honesty and directness. So when we came up with the name ClearBlade, when I came up with the name, I wanted a name that said cut through the BS. That's actually what ClearBlade means, because I see so much in the marketplace, so much, again, marketing's marketing. You're going to promote your product, but I see a lot of falsehoods. And I see people that aren't as truthful as they should be about what their product can and cannot do. And so we have a team here that will be very honest about where ClearBlade is best used and it's not. So we have customers that have now been with us for years. Having a product, having people that behave in that way, that respect each other, but also respect the customer, is critical to our success. So word of mouth is critical as these companies go through digital transformation, because digital transformation is extremely hard. There's a lot more politics that I think are the harder part of the problem than the technology part is, right? So you've got to be flexible and work with those partners, those customers, to say, okay, on your journey, how can ClearBlade best help you? Let us suggest the best ways to help. Let us suggest other products or other tools that we work well with to have an ecosystem of delivery. Being hardware agnostic was a big part of our design. You bring your own devices. We can recommend gateways, we can recommend sensors, but every vertical, every industry is different, right? We can recommend software partners, right? Development partners. We have a very small services team here that helps train the trainers, because we're not in the services business. We're in the software business. So really being flexible, not only with our technology, but flexible in the way we work with our customers is a big value add of what we do here.
I think that is great piece of advice to anyone thinking about starting IoT business or any business, is that you should focus on your core strength, like your genius zone, and be open and flexible to integrate with others that are great
Yep.
at something else. Because only then you can achieve really great results. You provide the core, the foundation, and you guarantee that the foundation will deliver the promise. And yeah,
There are companies out there, and I won't name the names, but there's lots of incumbents that have hardware and software that are bundled that are very closed, right? They don't want you, don't have an open API approach, and what they don't want to do is break what they call their chain. I'm going to sell you my device, it's going to flow into my service, and you're going to pay for it in this way, and no one else is going to participate in that chain. I think those days are numbered. I'm already seeing it happen that these providers need to open up their software and their hardware architecture, and companies are demanding it. We've had situations where that's happened with us, and embrace the fact that everyone's going to have different expertise that they can bring, whether it's hardware, whether it's vertical, whether it's software. Having a framework that can tie it all together is critical for things like what I call intelligent infrastructure. How are we going to connect up all the roadways, the railways, the airports, the waste management, the police, fire, electricity, energy, that everyone wants to do with IoT? Critical infrastructure is a big movement. You've heard smart cities is a huge mess because it's not just a technology mess, it's a funding mess. So you have to get better about using software that can cross-cut across all these technologies and unify how data flows, both at the edge and in the cloud and on-premise, and then get that data into the analytics and the AI engines that are very popular right now. But without it, they don't have the fuel they need to power this new future. I believe AI is transformational, but I believe there's a bit of overhype right now because access to the data is too fragmented.
AI is as good as the data we feed it, and IoT is the pipe that connects the physical and digital worlds. What's the best way to call you if someone is interested in what you offer, or they just want to ask you something about digital transformation in general?
So I'll point to clearblade.com, obviously, ClearBlade on LinkedIn and Twitter, or what was formerly Twitter, X. I can be reached on LinkedIn, Eric Simone. My X handle is at esimone928. So you now all know my birthday, September 28th. Yeah, and info@clearblade.com for email, right? Follow us on LinkedIn. There's lots of articles we put out, lots of things that we're doing around case studies, lots of at least really nice thought pieces by Aaron and our CTO. And happy to any questions anyone has.
Perfect. So once again, thank you so much for joining me today, for sharing your honest insights, because I believe that you provided tons of value for everyone listening.
Lukas, thanks for having me. I appreciated it.
Thank you for listening. Go to thefingers.com to find more materials about the Internet of Things domain. My name is Łukasz Malinowski, the Internet of Things advisor and trainer.